Hey, welcome to Musings of Them, the podcast. This is your host, Comb, your favorite baby, coming straight to you from my home. Musings of Them is the first ever fully channeled podcast where I deliver unscripted messages of divine wisdom, guidance, healing knowledge straight to you from the source, the universe, God, creator, whatever you want to call it, and my spiritual team. Weaving in my education, life experiences, healing journey as well, I'm here to motivate and empower you as an intuitive channel and medium, spiritual advisor, and coach. So ultimately, I hope that this podcast assists you on your healing and spiritual journey so that you can embody your authentic truth and be your best self, because you deserve it. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel to be notified of new podcasts as well as other projects I'll have on this site. And before we begin, I want us to get settled into our bodies and be present with the moment with a mindfulness meditation exercise. I want you, wherever you are, to get comfortable. Maybe you're standing or sitting or laying down, whatever that is, whatever that looks like. I want you to just get comfortable with your body. Soak your fingers, wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes. Soak your shoulders, going backwards. Roll your neck, starting in one direction. Allow yourself to just move and feel how it feels to do these little movements in your body from head to toe. You may notice an area of tension or an area that has strain or pain. Just notice these areas and see if you can allow movement, if it's possible, to enter these areas. I want you to take the time to just move slowly, intentionally. You may begin now to reverse the circle if you're still rolling your head or your shoulders. Reverse the direction of that. If you're wiggling your toes, see if you can move in a different way. If you're wiggling or moving your arms, see if you can be like water, allowing yourself to flow where you can. Now as we come to a still, letting out the last of those movements, we take 3 of the deepest breaths we've taken all day. Grounding ourselves into this present moment, grounding ourselves on this earth, we imagine that we are taking in deep, deep breaths, as if we are trees and our roots at the end of our feet are going into the earth, down to the core of the earth. We breathe in from those roots, allowing that breath to travel upwards from our feet all the way to the top of our heads, holding our breath at the top of our heads for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we release that breath from the top of our heads to our feet, releasing anything that does not belong to you in this moment. Releasing the tension, stress, fear, insecurities, doubts, we release back into the earth. Grateful that the earth can take this from us energetically. We breathe in again, deep breaths down from the core of the earth, breathing in the earth's abundance, earth's safety and security. We breathe that into our bodies, up to the top of our heads, and we hold our breaths now for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, releasing that breath from the top of our heads down to our feet, releasing
letting go of what you need to in this moment, allowing your shoulders to fall down at that out breath, your stomach to go back towards our spine, releasing and feeling that release back into the earth. And our last biggest breath, we take it in deep, allowing our stomach to expand from that core of the earth. We breathe in life's affirming energy, holding that to the top of our heads. We now hold for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Releasing that energy now again. What do you need to release in this moment? Allow that out breath to help you expel and release anything that needs to go right now. Knowing that it is being held by the earth, and the earth continues to hold us each and every day. And as we watch our breath return back to its natural rhythm, see if you can notice. I invite you to bring that attention to where you feel your breath the most. So some of you, it might be right at the tip of your nose, at the nostrils, feeling the heat as you breathe out and the coolness as you breathe in. It might be in your chest. It might be in your abdomen as your stomach expands and your chest deflates. Where do you feel your breath the most? Bringing attention and awareness to that location. Just follow it. What is the cadence, the rhythm of your breath? How fast, how deep are you breathing? Notice in this moment, in this time, the quality of your breath. This is not to judge or to critique how we are breathing, to just bring awareness to that we are breathing. Your mind might wander. Thoughts, feelings, sensations might pop up during this time. And that's okay. Just gently bring your breath back. Bring your mind back to return again to this breath that you hold in your body. Taking a few seconds now to just watch our breath. Gently and slowly at your own pace, bringing your awareness back to whatever room or location you are in, to the noises around you. What do you hear? What sounds? How far? How many? From which direction are you hearing them? What do you feel? Is there a breeze? Is the temperature hot, cold, warm? Do you feel your clothing on your skin? What do you feel? Now to our sight. What do you see around you? What are your eyes drawn to in this moment? What's the texture, color, size of that thing that your eye is drawn to? Now fully coming into our senses and awareness of where we are in our body placement. Are you sitting? Are you laying down? Are you standing? Bringing our awareness back into our senses and our body. We have arrived. Yay! Thank you for going through that short mindfulness exercise with me. Hopefully you feel more grounded in the present. And I think that just brings us to our channeled podcast portion, where, as y'all know, on this podcast, I ask Spirit, my spiritual team, my chi, what message should I share today for the collective? And I channel that message.
So we often talk about healing and trauma-centered care. And while reading this book called Monkey is the Messenger, Meditation and What Your Busy Mind is Trying to Tell You by Ralph De La Rosa, if you're at all interested in meditation, I highly suggest you pick it up and read it. He says a very interesting phrase that I want to really deconstruct here. He mentions, and I'm just going to read what he says for word. I want to make sure to say that this is not always the case, but it is potentially the case. Trauma can and does serve an adaptive, positive, evolutionary purpose, a purpose that is very much in service of our personal ecosystems as well as that of human civilization. So this really struck me because as someone who has experienced a lot of trauma in my lifetime, who has been fortunate to have the resources and find the support, whether those resources be material, spiritual, mind, body, communal support, to make it to the other side of the trauma. I have found that that trauma has been one of the most strengthening aspects of my life. It has informed who I am, and I have gained a perspective, appreciation of life that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Now, Ralph De La Rosa goes on to say that in order for trauma to serve us, in order for us to grow from trauma, we, as I mentioned, must have not only the resources, both material and psycho-emotional, to come out on the other side of it. We must also be one not currently experiencing the trauma, and also not have to deal with the trauma that is born from institutionalized oppression, or have again the resources to not have that oppression be pressed down on us. Now, marginalized people are dealing with oppressions, institutionalized oppressions from all corners, especially when it's structural. However, this idea of trauma being one of the biggest gifts in terms of growth, I think is something worth mentioning. And that, I think, is the paradox of trauma. That when we are in such a deep, dark place, and if you've ever struggled against addiction, struggled through trauma, struggled through abuse, struggled through what you at your lowest point thought you could never get through, where you have hit rock bottom and cried your heart out and maybe have been suicidal, thinking, I can't do this anymore. And I've been there multiple times in my life where I just couldn't do it. And I looked for a way out through my vices, through people to distract me. But deep down inside, I was empty and in a dark, dark space, dealing with addiction, dealing with depression, dealing with suicidality. And coming out on the other side of it, I realized that, as Ralph de la Rosa puts it, there is an adaptive purpose to trauma. And I think back to the trauma, the intergenerational trauma of my ancestors, the intergenerational trauma of the African diaspora, the intergenerational trauma of queer, disabled, Black, immigrant, insert marginalized group here. And the strength that they had to have, the mental strength and the capacities that they developed to make it through, that adaptive purpose is showing. He goes on to say that to begin to question when you're in such a hurt and struggling place, to begin to question, what am I missing? What is inside me that needs to be healed? Why am I stuck? What do I need to learn from this situation? We begin to see within us, we begin to unravel within us what we truly want from life, what it is we are truly trying to align our souls to, what it is our soul is calling us to do. And those who have not experienced trauma, who've grown up and lived in a comfortable life, although they may have faced a level of comfort, don't have that depth of self-questioning because they never had to do it. They don't have that depth of struggle and hurt because they've never gone through it. And we can put this on any dominant group, whether it be race or otherwise. When you have to struggle through trauma, you have to be able to adapt or it breaks you. And I say that being very careful with the language of have to, because trauma breaks down. It breaks down your spirit, it breaks down your soul, it breaks down your mind, it breaks down your body, it breaks down your community. And it breaks you down to such a level that you forget who you truly are. But when you are fortunate to come out on the other side of it, to know that you've experienced that and you survive, it can be used as a fuel to break you forward, to break you open to the truth and to the beauty of who you truly are. And I don't use this, and I don't want to use this episode to glamorize trauma, because I wouldn't wish trauma on anyone. But the fact of the reality is we live in a trauma-filled society. We live in a world where millions and billions of people are experiencing trauma day in and day out just because of their identity, just because of historical structures that have been put in place that have not been questioned by dominant groups. Trauma is all around us and we can't escape it. And when you're living a spiritual life, you have to acknowledge it. You cannot meditate your way out of trauma. You cannot mindfulness your way out of trauma. You will not be able to move out of trauma until we as a society can acknowledge the trauma and address the structures and societies and the ways that they bleed into every single thing around us. The oppression that bleeds into every single thing around us. The paradox of trauma And Ralph de la Rosa puts this so well when he mentions his own. He wouldn't wish it on his worst enemy, but he is grateful and wouldn't trade it for the world. Okay, I added in the grateful part, but I think that tells you the paradox of it, because anyone who's experienced trauma and has gone through the other side knows the depth of strength and unshakability that you gain from coming out on the other side, even though you have to go through the healing. And the difference is the resources. The resources of being able to heal through your trauma. The resources of not being able to be confronted with oppression that can trigger your trauma, or that even puts you in situations where you are further traumatized. Some people have the privilege to do so, right? And when you have money, when you are in certain spaces, whether it be academia or otherwise, you have certain resources that you can leverage to help pull you out of the trauma. And so part of my life purpose, part of it, is to help guide others through their pain and trauma, because I know what it feels to be at the bottom. I know what it feels to be stuck, to feel stuck, rather. Not knowing, or rather not wishing that there was a next day. Wishing you could fall asleep and that would just be it. And because I know the depths and the amounts of healing I have had to do to make it on the other side, I want to be a part of this generation of people who are reaching back, reaching to the side, providing the resources to marginalized communities so that they too can have the opportunity to heal. It is not just the opportunity to heal, it's also dismantling and disrupting these fucked up systems that continue to traumatize us. So again, I see social justice and healing as one. Social justice and trauma healing as one. Social justice and spirituality as one. All of that is the same. And so the paradox of trauma asks us to move through the unthinkable. Move through and heal from situations that have broken us down. And find a way, find an opportunity, receive the resources to break through. And allow that trauma to build us in, build us up. I was talking to a friend, a dear friend, mentor of mine that I've known since high school. She's known me since I've been in survival mode. And I was a super serious 17-year-old who felt like I had the weight on my shoulders. The responsibility of being a second parent, 2 siblings, the responsibility of having expectations placed on me that I felt like I couldn't really reach. And as we were talking, we mentioned in our conversation how, look, I'm just here to speak the truth, and I will speak it as I see it. So if you're easily triggered, I suggest that you take a break from this and come back and allow yourself to potentially stretch to the outer edges of your comfort zone. Episode 2, listen and see if this relates to you. If you are in a white body, there is, in this country of the USA, a global reckoning to be had. she mentioned that Trump needed to happen. Trump needed to wake people up. And I really do agree with that. And wake people up, by the people, I mean white people. White-bodied people needed to be woken up to the truth of what this nation is. And it's so unfortunate that some people were faced with the truth and dug their heels in. But again, change is hard, and when you're met with change, some people deny. But in our conversation, we found it so interesting how white-bodied people don't really have the same history of trauma, the same lineage of trauma as Black and brown folks. Now, Black and brown folks know trauma. We know trauma intergenerationally. We know trauma historically, especially when your peoples were enslaved and stolen from their native lands and made to work for nothing and treated like lower than animals. So that trauma instilled a sense of strength in our ancestors, a strength that white-bodied people don't necessarily have access to, a lack of adaptive response. And so we see that as the world changes, as the world becomes less white-bodied, less white-centered, less straight, less dominant group, and makes way for those on the margins to obtain and step into the power that they already have, to empower themselves to show up and take space. White-bodied people, straight people, insert dominant group here, just don't know what to do. Y'all just don't know. You're confused. You're anxious. You're angry. Because for the first time, you're being met with a world that doesn't center you. And that centering is met with loss and grief. And that loss and grief is, instead of being internalized and sat with, is being projected outwards. And so we are seeing white supremacist groups spring up. We are seeing the Chads and the Karens act up. We are seeing young white men go on murderous rampages. That is the truth of this reality. That is the truth of the lack of an adaptive response, a historical adaptive response to trauma. When you live in comfortability, you don't have to adapt because things are easy. And when things are easy, you aren't challenged. You aren't challenged to grow. You're not challenged to be there is an inability to delve deep into the psyche of an individual or a group or a community when things are easy. There's no need to. When there is an absence of trauma, especially in this case, racial trauma, heterosexual trauma, or rather the lack of that, you don't need to adapt. There isn't a positive response system that can ever be gained from such. And so this is a calling that the paradox of trauma, the difficultness of trauma can imbue a gift, a lesson, strength, perseverance, determination. It can do those things in the right circumstances, where there is support and resources, when there is a difference in situation. But in the absence of trauma can provide a contraction, in my opinion. This is just my humble opinion, y'all, okay? Humble opinion. Just speaking what is coming to me. It provides a contraction because that contraction comes with ease, comfortability. You don't have to work. You don't have to claw through your darkness. You don't have to confront the darkness. You don't have to break through the darkness because you're always in the light. Always in the light. So, that's something I just wanted to get out there. Is this paradox of trauma and what does it really mean? Because I know that I would be a very different person if I didn't experience the trauma that I did. And even though I am still healing parts of the trauma, I have made it through the worst of it. And I am so grateful and fortunate to be able to sit here and to talk this way about my trauma. It means I've done a lot of healing. I've had the resources to do the healing. And there are so many people, so many marginalized people who don't. And then there are so many people in the dominant group who don't even think of these things because they don't even have to. And we as a society cannot advance unless that paradox is truly explored. And unless that paradox is also seen in the opposite way. What happens to a society who doesn't experience trauma? Or rather, what happens to the dominant group that doesn't experience trauma? What is taken away from them? So I'll stop here. Thank you for taking your time to listen to the stream of consciousness on trauma and the paradox of it all. Appreciate your ears, your time, your energy on this day wherever you are. And I am grateful for you for allowing yourself to listen, to see and understand, maybe not understand, but hear a new perspective. This is coming straight to you. And to end today's podcast, I want to give you this quote. The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And that's that on the gifts of difficulty and the gifts of trauma that can arise.
Musings of Them, the podcast, is sponsored by me. I am the co-founder of Healing for Liberation, or H4L. H4L is a visionary healing studio and consulting firm that provides innovative, integrative wellness, and holistic healing services, products, and spaces. If you are seeking one-on-one coaching, workshops, or events, or even intuitive guidance and energy healing that can help you release past trauma and pain, connect with your authentic truth and inner wisdom to empower you, transform, and liberate yourself and life,
go to h4l.studio. That's the letter H, the letter 4, L, studio. Not .com, but .studio. I also run a YouTube channel as well that provides free resources like meditation, mindfulness, Reiki healing. So I'll have the links to not only my website, but to the YouTube channel below in the About section. That's the message I have for y'all today. Remember to subscribe to my channel, like this week's episode, and to share to someone who you think this might resonate with or be helpful for. Remember, we are here to cultivate an open, honest, transparent space full of radical vulnerability, non-judgment, and unconditional love for ourselves and others. And as always, I am so grateful for your presence and taking the time and the space actually, to listen wherever you are in the world. I don't take it for granted, and it really means a lot to me. So I'll catch y'all next week, and until then, peace and love.